Single most important thing everybody can work on every single day and is totally free. You might say shadowboxing, and yes, but more specifically, it's your footwork. Now I hear you, footwork is boring. But let me ask you, is footwork really boring, or are you just bad at it? What's going on, guys? It's Rob here with Combat Self-Defense, and today we're gonna go over a simple footwork pattern that I use for day one beginners as well as my more advanced students to help them get more comfortable moving their feet. And as always, make sure you're subscribed and you have notifications turned on. That way you never miss a new video. The best way to build a house is from the ground up. That said, we're gonna do the same thing today. So for right now, we're only gonna talk about the lower body, but later on, we'll incorporate the hands. Now, you may have noticed I laid down a couple pieces of tape and made myself this little cross. This is gonna help my footwork pattern, but you don't need to lay this down. You can totally do this just visualizing the cross there. That being said, we need to talk about our stances. For today, there's 3 basic stances we can play with. You have your more Thai style stance where the center line is pointing right at your opponent and your weight is about 50-50. I have basically all of my weapons equally here, except for kind of my sidekick, but it's not very hard to get there. On the other end of the spectrum, we have the karate style stance, which is more sideways. And it kind of minimizes my rear side ability to strike, but it gives me a lot of power on the lead side and it's very explosive. I can move in and out very quickly. And then we have the stance that kind of splits the difference. I'm a little bit wider than I am with the Thai stance, but I'm not completely sideways like I am with the karate stance. And I still have a lot of access to my hands as well as that sidekick. I'm probably gonna hang out more in that middle stance, but if you wanna hang out in the Thai style stance or the karate stance, whatever, doesn't really matter. Talking about our steps, the first thing we need to talk about is the push step. When you first start and someone tells you to step forward with your punch, people tend to wanna step like this, which is wrong. Don't do that. I have another video about it. You can check it out right here. The push step is the step that you wanna do. I'm gonna be here in my stance and I'm gonna push off my back leg as I reach with the lead leg. So I push forward and then push back. My legs aren't crossing my center line because the time that my legs spin here is the time where I'm off balance and where my opponent can sweep me. So I don't want to come here. I don't want to come in the middle as I step forward. I want to keep my center of gravity right in the middle, push forward, and then push back. And those are our first 2 steps. We have the push step forward, push step back. Facing you guys, I'm here, forward, and back. Every time I want to move, I need to push off the opposite leg and reach with the leg in the direction that I'm going. So steps 1 and 2 are the forward and backward push step. Steps 3 and 4 are going to be our lateral steps. I push forward and then back. Then I'm going to push off the right foot and step to the left. So I push here. This is me moving out of the way of an opponent coming towards me. Here I'm moving offensively forward at them, moving backwards, still offensively, but it looks defensively. And here to the side, I'm kind of moving out of the way as my opponent charges towards me. This is kind of both equally offensive and defensive at the same time. So our first 4 steps: push forward, push back, push left, push right. From this side. Now, I want you to notice I'm not pushing off a flat foot. I'm pushing off the ball of my foot. Because if I push off the heel, I end up dragging this leg, which is not always the worst thing, but if you can have better technique, have better technique. So I want to push off the ball of my foot, giving me the ability to spring forward, backward, left, right. I can do it flat-footed, but that turns it more into a hop, and that moment when you're in the air is where your opponent can catch you. So push off the ball of your foot. This gives you more balance, more stability, and it allows you to move a little bit quicker. All right, the push step is pretty basic. Like I said, it's day 1 stuff. Maybe you'll find steps 5 and 6 a little sexier. These are our pivot steps. So I'm gonna once again start on the center line. I'm gonna take my lead foot, whether it's my left foot if I'm orthodox or my right foot if I'm southpaw, and step to either 10 or 2 o'clock. In this case, I step to 10 o'clock and turn my foot inward slightly. Then from there, my rear foot is gonna step back exactly in the same plane that it's in now. That's my pivot step. So again, I step, push, and pivot, boom. If my opponent was racing towards me, what I'm doing is turning and facing him like a matador so that I can throw a kick, a punch, a knee, or go for a takedown if that's what I want to do. Now I want you to notice my right foot isn't dragging over into the same quadrant of the tape as my lead foot. If I do this much of a pivot, then I've thrown myself off balance and away from my opponent. My rear pivot's gonna involve a little bit of a stance switch. I'm gonna bring my lead foot halfway back to check in with my rear foot. From here, my rear foot's gonna turn slightly in and my lead foot's gonna swing around back towards me. So I'm starting with my left foot in front, but by the end, I have my right foot in front. Now, this looks very awkward in slow motion. This looks like I'm here turning my hip inwards and then kind of just, but I gotta show you guys slowly so you can pick it up more quickly. Putting it all together, we have push forward, push back, push to the side, return to center, push to the side, return to center. Then from here, I'm gonna step towards 2 o'clock, turn in. Step 5 is the pivot, return back to center, swing back, opposite stance, other pivot. Again, push 1, 2, 3, 4, pivot 1, return to center, pivot 2. Okay, now we're gonna move on to steps 7, 8, 9, and 10. And to do that, I gotta add more tape. All right, good enough for government work. Now, my cross turned into kind of a star, and that's great because I'm the star of this show. I'm gonna introduce us to the triangle step, which, if you can see the tape, is created by me making this X across my cross. I now have an angle coming out to my left and to my right, and the hypotenuse, I think that's what it's called, is going out in front of me as well as behind me. So triangle step number 1, I'm once again gonna push off my rear foot, but now instead of coming forward, I'm gonna push out at a 45-degree angle, or towards 10 o'clock if you prefer that. Now, instead of returning back to center here, what I'm gonna do is push off at my angle, and then my feet are gonna meet in the middle. From here, my right foot is gonna step out again at 45, but now towards my right. So I'm here. So this is a way for me to switch the stance that I'm in while not getting too far away or rushing towards my opponent. This is a step that I took from Filipino martial arts, where they do this all day long to incorporate their knife cuts and their baston swings, whatever. And if you notice anybody who likes to switch when they throw their hands, they're doing a triangle step. Now, when I do this little skip right here, I change my triangle step into a skip step. It's not a different movement, it's just happening quickly. And now that we're comfortable with that, let's talk about 9 and 10, which is just moving backwards at an angle. So I stepped off to the side, waylaid in the middle, stepped off to the side, and then waylaid again in the middle. Now I'm gonna stay in the southpaw stance, but my left leg is gonna step back. So as my right foot comes here, my left foot shuffles back. I'm still in my southpaw stance, but I move backwards with balance. So with a little speed, I'll go triangle 1, 2, 3, and then now 4. All I'm doing is getting comfortable switching my stances without throwing my center of gravity, my center of balance, out of whack. From the side, I come triangle 1, back to center, 2, back to center, 3, back to center, 4. This is a great way to move defensively backwards without tripping over your feet. Let's run through all 10 steps. Let's just keep our hands nice and high. Worry about the feet, not the hands. So, number 1, push forward. 2, push back. 3, to the side, back to center. 4, to the side, back to center. 5 is pivot 1, back to center. 6 is pivot 2, back to center. Triangle 1 is 7, back to center. Triangle 2 is 8. Triangle 3 is 9, back to center. Triangle 4 is 10. This right here is basically every step you're ever going to take in martial arts. Yes, right now we're focusing on that push step, but you could equally be doing more of a gallop or a pendulum. Doesn't really matter. You're either going forward and backwards, laterally, left and right, radially with your pivots, or angling off with your triangle step. So if you can master this 10-step system, you're gonna have most footwork done, doesn't matter what style you practice in. So I don't personally feel like this footwork drill is boring, because I think you get a lot out of it for the very minimal amount of work it takes to get good at it. But if you're still a non-believer, let's make it more complicated by adding our hands. First, I'm gonna add in a simple 1-2. So I push forward, jab, cross, and I'm gonna push back, jab, cross once again. Now as I push to my left, I'm gonna add in a hook and a cross, check back to center, push to my right, and reverse it with a cross to a hook. So all told, I'm gonna go jab, cross, hook, cross, back to center, cross, hook. Adding the pivot, we're gonna do the check hook, which we talked about earlier. So pivot 1, I step out, and as I pivot, check hook with the left hand. Again, I'm here, and then with the rear pivot, it's the same thing, but now with the rear hand. So I pivot to the rear, boom, there's my check hook, or a swing hook as I prefer to call it. So again, I'm here, From there, we're gonna do the triangle steps. Triangling forward, I'm gonna throw either the overhand or the ridge hand, whichever one you wanna do. So I step out, overhand, check in the middle, overhand or ridge hand, step back, and now I'm gonna do what I call the reverse punch. This is called the reverse punch because I step backwards and spring forward, throwing my weight into the punch. You could also think about this as like a plant cross. Doesn't really matter. All I'm doing is throwing my rear hand into my opponent. Let's run through these again. I'm gonna face this way this time. Push forward, jab, cross. Push back, jab, cross. Push to your left, hook, cross. Back to center, push to your right, cross, hook. Back to center, pivot, check, hook. Swing, check, hook. Step out, overhand or ridge hand. Feet together, step out, overhand. Step back, reverse punch. Feet together, step back, reverse punch. And there's all 10 steps with your hands. And you can repeat this over and over again. You can add in kicks, you can add in knees. Doesn't really matter. This pattern is something that exists in all martial arts styles and is always useful to do. You're never gonna waste your time doing footwork patterns. And if this still isn't fun for you, grab yourself a partner and do it with them. Not side by side, but facing each other. This is one of those drills that looks really good as a mirror, and it takes a lot of coordination and a lot of focus to get two people doing it at the exact same time to each other. And then, to make it even more challenging, try to consciously apply some of the steps from this drill in sparring or in your fights. Obviously, the goal is to do it without thinking about it, but first, you have to be doing it consciously. So, do it with a partner when they want to do it, and then do it against a partner when they don't want you to do it. So, if you respect the philosophy of building the house from the ground up, you're going to learn to put yourself in a position where you can strike your opponent with basically whatever you want. These are the strikes that I chose to use today because I have fun throwing these particular strikes. If you want to throw something else, go for it. In fact, film yourself doing it, tag me on Instagram if you post it, or send it to the email down in the description. And that all being said, if I showed you guys that footwork patterns can be fun and you feel like you learned something, and you're looking for a channel that combines the practicality of combat sports with the reality of self-defense and the fun of traditional martial arts, then please be sure to subscribe, tap the notification bell, like, share, and leave a comment. And if you want to show support to the channel, head on over to combatsd.square.site and pick up a t-shirt, tank top, crop top, coffee mug, or anything else we have in the store. That's the best way to show support. This has been Rob from Combat Self-Defense. I want to thank you guys for all the hard work. Thank you for the hard work yet to be done, and I'll see you next time.